We're here to begin a 6-week series of NEJM Career Center Conversations. This one is on women positions and leadership roles. Future weeks will feature Career Center conversations on related topics, for instance, mentoring, flexibility in work schedules, and career planning. We start off with leadership, and appropriately, we have guests from the American Medical Women's Association, or AMWA, including that organization's president, Dr. Farzana Hafizullah, its executive director, Dr. Eliza Chin, and its president-elect, Dr. Teresa Rohr-Kirchgraber. Also with us is Dr. Tanya Douglas. Also with us, Dr. Tanya Douglas Holland of Bayer Healthcare. We shouldn't forget also to mention doctors to be Ashley Aluko and Christina Grassi of Harvard Medical School, and Nidhi Ravishankar of Windsor University School of Medicine. They will be moderating the discussion online and asking questions. Welcome to all of you. My colleague at the NEJM group, Kathy Mai, would like to welcome you as well. Kathy?
Hi, everyone. On behalf of the NEJM Career Center, I just wanted to express how excited we are to be part of this Women in Medicine discussion series with Medstro and AMWA. As a trusted source for physician career information, we hope that this week's topics and those to follow in the next few weeks will spark productive and educational discussions. With that, I'll turn it back over to Joe.
Okay. Thanks, Kathy. Dr. Chin also would like to say something about AMWA.
So the American Medical Women's Association is excited to be partnering with the New England Journal of Medicine Open Group Forum for this exciting 6-week series on women in medicine. The timing is especially good for AMWA as we are doing it for our centennial celebration in Chicago next month. AMWA was founded in 1915 by Dr. Bertha Van Hoosen at a time when women were less than 5% of the physician population. Over the past century, AMWA has been the vision and voice of women in medicine and an advocate for women's health. Thank you very much.
It's nice. It's great to have you here. Well, my first question, if I may, is to the students. Ashley, you'll be moderating a discussion about leadership online during the week. And I know that you have described yourself as having an interest in gender disparities in academic medicine. What do you hope next week's discussions will reveal? And I'd ask Christina and Nidhi to join in at Lib.
Yeah, so thank you, Joe. So I'm really excited about next week's discussion, and the moderators have actually had some discussion about what we want to cover over the upcoming week. And I think what we want to know is, one, to get the perspective of these women who've been very dynamic and very successful in their fields, and sort of get an idea of the sorts of things they did that allowed them to be successful, challenges they faced, things like that. And then also we want to talk about sort of what the issues are and how we can solve them. So we'd like to also get sort of very broad ideas of things that have hindered women's progress in academic medicine and ways that they have been addressed and can be addressed in the future.
Christina, what about you? What are you looking forward to?
Sure. I mean, I'll second what Ashley had said. And I think, too, one of the things that we're hoping to get out of the discussions is really getting to the core of the issue of why there are a lot fewer women in leadership roles, particularly in academic medicine. And if you look at the disparities, there's a huge disparity. And really trying to get at the core of what are the issues, what are the problems, and how can we concretely kind of address these going forward.
Nidhi.
Yeah, I mean, as Ashley and Christina mentioned, I think personally what I'm trying to achieve is, because of the recent rise in academic medicine, just to see how the hospitals have been supporting, any research fields that the women hope to accomplish, or, any papers, publications, how open is the hospital to sending them to international conferences? Are the other physicians willing to work with them on any recent, research projects, things like that, and just getting a core sense of how women are able to progress in medicine, not just in the clinic, but outside as well.
Dr. Hafizullah, do you have any observations on the fact that almost 3/4 of health services managers are women, but less than 5% of healthcare company CEOs?
Yes.
Great question. Absolutely. Today I actually just had a meeting with another healthcare company, and they're focused on women's health, but 0% of their leadership board are made up of women. And so when I posed that question to them today, asking them, it's wonderful that you're involved in women's health and that's your focus, and how come your leadership board is not diversified to include women? They didn't have an answer for me.
And I'm sorry, you may be frozen. Is your camera frozen?
No.
Okay, I'm sorry. It looked like your picture was frozen. I think it is. Certainly we can hear you. Dr. Douglas Holland, you're not in the academic sector. What are things like there, and are you trying to change culture?
Well, I think it's a very interesting question when you talk about changing culture, because from the standpoint of, I think all of us are oftentimes trying to push the envelope, as you say, and work towards, particularly as it relates to women, but diversity in a variety of different sectors, gender, etc. So I mean, to flat answer your question, I think all of us, here would probably recognize that there is a need in every sector, whether it's in academic or in the business sector or what have you, to change thought patterns, whether it's corporate culture or otherwise, because there are very few of us, very few, and moving towards diversity, I think, is an ideal, ultimate goal of what we want to do.
It must be difficult it's brave of all of you to discuss this topic, because according to the statistics, 95% of the CEOs of your organizations are men, and so it mustn't be easy to talk about that. And none of you strike me as cowardly. So I just wanted to. Hats off to you for what you're doing here. The problem that we face, I think, as a profession, and I'm not a member of the profession, I'm just a writer and an editor, it is that certainly women are going to dominate medicine very quickly, within a generation. So, Dr. Rohr Kirchgraber, how do you think that will change the culture of medicine? What do you see in medicine today that you think will change, say, in a generation's time, with women dominating the positions possibly now held by men?
Well, I'm glad to hear the domination, although I'm not so sure that that's actually going to come to pass. When you look at the last 30 some odd years, we've been 30% of the medical school class for the last 30 years at least. Now we're 50%. So you would think that just by looking at a pipeline, we should already be 30% of the top, but that's not the case. So we have to be very specific, we have to be very direct, and we have to be willing to kind of put ourselves out there. For example, when a headhunter is looking to hire an executive, many don't actually look for women. Why? Partly because we don't negotiate for our salaries like the men do. Because of that, the headhunters earn less money on their recruit. So we have to understand the basics of negotiation. We have to understand what salary ranges we should be looking for. We have to use all of our resources. Because if we're not even being evaluated by the executive headhunters for those higher level positions, that already puts us at a disadvantage.
Well, where is it possible to learn those kinds of skills, those negotiating skills, other than running up against the wall and bouncing off it a few times and figuring out a way around it? Would you have advice for say the students, for instance?
Oh, absolutely. One, take the opportunity to get involved in higher level positions of leadership. But then two, reach out. There are a number of different programs. The WMC, for example, has a program for early, mid, and late career faculty development programs for women. The AMWA is putting together a program called Negotiating the Divide that we're doing across the state of Indiana, and hopefully and further along in other national places as we move forward. But there are a number of different opportunities for us. We have to take advantage of those opportunities. But what I've been finding as I work with women's groups is that we need each other, and so getting together in small groups and actually discussing what goes on. We had a meeting yesterday, for example. We had an AMWA Physician Indianapolis branch meeting, and just having the 11 or 12 of us together was phenomenal. When we brought up the issue of negotiation, one of our surgeons mentioned that we actually didn't negotiate. They gave her an offer, and she said, "That offer is no good. Come back to me when you have a real offer." And I thought, now that's a kind of a different way of doing things. And and she never told them what she wanted. She just said, "That's obviously too low. You don't really want me." And so there are lots of different ways of doing things. But by getting that exposure, by talking to people at higher levels, but by also making clear our role and our goal. When folks are looking for leaders, they look for people like themselves. We have to change that outlook. We have to be assertive, and we have to kind of pound the table. Just like Farzana, when she was at her meeting today, he specifically said, "Where are the women in your leadership positions?" That's why we need to start doing that. We need to ask more.
Uh,
Go
Go ahead.
Transparency is so important, and being proactive in the process, not sitting back and waiting for the opportunities to present themselves to you.
Right.
Understanding that it's never too early to start networking. You have to reach out. You have to not only look at everything in a detailed fashion, but pull back and see the entire forest. You're going to see opportunities that may have overlapped with your passion from the beginning, when you do start to look outside the box and approach things from a very different standpoint. We as women, we have a natural ability to connect with others in a multifaceted way. If we utilize that, it's an inbuilt negotiation in a sense, open up doors for you. And that's something that I often talk to my young students and residents or mentees about, making sure that you pull back, and when you're networking, make sure that you understand that this relationship is only going to last as much as you put into it, as long as you put something into it, and you continue to pursue that passionately. Making sure that you are taking a very wide approach in trying to attain your goals.
I was reading something over the weekend, and I can't remember where it was, I'm sorry to say, but they were talking about the glass ceiling, and they said, well, no, it's really not a glass ceiling. It's more of an infinite labyrinth of small things that need negotiating as you go along. Do any of you recognize that as truer than the glass ceiling?
Oh, absolutely. There are so many ways that we can kind of give ourselves a hand up or take a wrong turn. One of the things is making others know that you're interested in a position, especially like for the students. When there is something coming up, reach out and say, I'd like to do that, or how did you get there? You're sitting down with your chief or your chair and they say, where do you want to be in 5 years? And you could say, I'd like to be you. How do I get there?
Yeah. Anyone else have any observations on that?
Can I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
So I was wondering, how do you actually achieve the right balance between leadership and academics, as well as maintaining the healthy family or social life for that matter?
That's a great question. Of course, the work-life balance issue plays a huge role in the path you choose to take. I mean, I'm a mom of 4. I have my leadership duties and my private practice. But for me, the strategy that works very well is finding ways to overlap your goals, so that with very few moves you can accomplish, what you set out to do.
I also think it's very important that you define for yourself to what balance looks like, because I think we often talk about success and we use the term balance, but I think each individual, it's important for them to really be very clear on what does that look like for them, because what it may look like for you may not be the same for someone else. And so I think that's very important to get very crystal clear about what that term means. And I also think, you know, there's a perspective on, we talk a lot about work-life balance, et cetera, for everyone, but I think even recognizing that, you know, this having it all may not necessarily be all at once, and that it may be over the course of time. So I think those are things to keep in mind as well.
Okay. And I'd like to echo that last comment about remembering that it's over a span of a lifetime, not all at once. I know from my own personal experience, I actually took a few years off of medicine and then came back eventually back to work. And I know many women have done the same or have cut back when their children are young, when they had to be around and be more present at home, and as their kids got older, came back into full force. And many women near retirement age are at the peak of their careers. It's important to keep that perspective.
May I ask a question about that, Eliza? When you say you took a couple of years off, medicine changes so rapidly. How did you find it difficult to come back into and to keep up with the changes that had occurred? Did you notice that there had been big changes?
Yeah, I was off probably for about 2 years, maybe a little bit over 2 years, and I did keep up with some journal reading. But definitely, when I came back into medicine, it took a little time to prepare. I always tell people the two scariest times in my career as a physician were one when I finished residency and started practicing for the first time, and the buck stopped with me. And the second time really was when I came back to practice after many years. Things that, you know, were familiar, back of the hand, prescription doses. I, you know, went back and looked up everything all over again. Had to update myself on how medicine had changed. So it definitely, you know, presented some challenges, but is very doable. And I would always advise women who do take some time off to kind of keep one foot in the door and keep abreast of what's happening in medicine, so when you come back, it's a little easier.
Maybe they could read the New England Journal of Medicine or something like that.
Yeah.
Well,
and you know, that's actually part of the reason why this year at our American Medical Women's Association conference, we have a pre-conference workshop that's specifically on faculty development or personal development. One of those is called the on-ramps and off-ramps of your career, specifically for those people who are thinking about taking time off or have already taken time off, to be really aware ahead of time what's going to be entailed when you get back on. In some states, you have to retake boards. You have to document your amount of CME. I mean, there's some specific things to be thinking about.
Okay. You know, I have a friend who's a medical student in the Midwest, and she's very interested in this matter. And she said that she was talking with some senior women physicians whose advice was very dispiriting to her. They said, you can't have a family and be a doctor. Well, at least two of you, maybe three or more, are proof against that. But how do you prevent discouraging young medical students with those kinds of attitudes? Is that part of the dying culture that we're seeing when people get advice like that?
I had no idea people were still giving that stupid advice. I heard that 30 years ago when I was in pre-med. And I think if you ask all of us, I'm married, I have 3 kids, I've always worked full-time. There is nothing that's going to hold you back. If it's something that you love, you're going to do it, and then you're going to do it well. Let's just get rid of that notion about, you know, children somehow inhibit your ability to have a career.
And they empower you to open up further doors or more opportunities. You get a whole new lens to view your career by. I mean, I have 4 children, and I punctuated my medical school residency practice, my own practice, etc., with all of them, and my husband and I met during orientation at medical school. And no, you can certainly do it. You can have your cake and eat it too. It's totally up to you and your mindset that you choose to have on the journey.
Well, I mean, this advice came from a senior woman, and so I was surprised to hear it. So I wanted to run it past you, run it past you all.
Actually, Joe, can I share a really quick anecdote along those lines?
Please.
And I think it really reflects how maybe the culture of the practice of medicine has changed. I gave a Women in Medicine talk, it was over 10 years ago, and to a local hospital, and actually in the audience were many men, and one of the men stood up right after the talk and raised his hand and said that he was so thankful for Women in Medicine, that when he first started practicing medicine was 24/7. It was very, very difficult to get away, very difficult to find coverage because you were a solo practitioner. He really felt that women coming into the practice of medicine had helped change that culture. Asking for group coverage, practice coverage, time off was much easier, and that really changed the culture of medicine. So I think that there may have been a time that it was very difficult as a woman in medicine to have a career and family and balance the two, but I think as more and more women have come into the medical field, the culture of the practice of medicine has changed to make it easier.
Do you know the first editorial I ever wrote for the New England Journal of Medicine was about Alice Hamilton, who was the first faculty member, a female faculty member at Harvard Medical School. He had died at the age of 102, and Franz Ingelfinger, who was the editor at that point, came into my office and said, "Joe, somebody has died that we need to write an obituary about, but all of her friends have died as well." And she was a fascinating person. She was from Chicago originally, and I'm sure remains a beacon to a lot of people. What before we leave, what are you hoping? There are several topics. I mean, this is going to go on. This online discussion will go on over 6 weeks' time, and is there something that any of you really wants to make sure that the audience hears?
Well, this is Teresa, and I guess I want to make sure that we have some very specific, pointed things to suggest. Specific organizations or meetings or books to read, or maybe some specific ideas of reaching out, of organizing, of getting with other people. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to give you all some specific ideas on how to get ahead.
Okay. I want to thank all of you, and I especially want to thank the students. The students will be grilling you online over the course of the next several weeks, and they have a lot to learn, and I'm sure a lot to teach as well. I want to thank all of you for spending the time with us today, and I want to wish you all well on the coming 6 weeks and on the coming several years of your professional lives. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.